Hey guys, welcome back to Stuff. This week I'm fitting some skirting board in my spare room. If you like the sound of that, stick around. And remember, while this intro's on, drop me a like and subscribe to my channel. So as mentioned, I am fitting some skirting board today in my spare room. I will be going through how I do the corners. I've only got internal corners this time around, so I'll just be showing you how I do scribes to get into the corners, showing you how I fix it to the walls, and how I finish it off with a bit of caulk at the end. But I can't do that in here, so let's pop over to my spare room. So we are back in the spare room. Today is skirting board day, not one of my favourite jobs, but we'll see how I get on. I always find it a bit of a pain, especially after I've plastered, because my walls are a bit wavy, but we'll see how we get on today. So let's just take a look at where I'm going to be putting the skirting boards. So I've got, obviously skirting boards go around the edge of the room, they cover any gaps in the flooring like I've got here, and just generally cover at the bottom of the wall. So you can see I've got a few gaps in my plasterwork there, but I'm not too bothered because I'll grab some positions over here for fixings. I've got to do a bit of filling in this corner, but I'll come on to that a bit later. Just go behind those pipeworks, that shouldn't be too much of a bother, and then down here and round the corner. So that's where I'm fitting the skirting board today. What I'm going to be using is MDF skirting board as opposed to pine or anything else, because I've used pine before, and what tends to happen is you get loads of warps in it or bends in the board, especially over the longer lengths. Even if you buy from like timber merchants or things like that, can't guarantee the quality, so I always like to use MDF, and that way I get a better finish in my view. So I've just bought some of this from Wickes, local DIY store. Hopefully this is good quality, but again, we'll see in a minute. So first thing to do is a bit of prep work. Over this side, on this wall, this is a stud wall, so I will just be marking the stud work and screwing directly into that. So that's the easy side. For the wall over by the window here, I'll be drilling through the blockwork where I can find it and putting in some screws and wall plugs, and the same over here. Where I've got this gap down here where some of the brickwork's come out, I will be just packing that out with some wood just to try and make sure that I've got something for my skirting board to grab onto. I've also got to do a little bit of prep down here, so if you've got any sort of bits of plaster like this bit here, you might want to just knock those flush, just so that your skirting board has the best chance of sitting flush to your wall. When it comes to actually starting the work or the skirting boards, I'll be starting, so there's the doorway, we're starting in this bottom corner and working around. So I'll have a long straight edge, a long straight piece up to that corner. I'll have a scribed joint in that corner, and then the next piece I'll butt up against there. I'll have another scribe on the end of this piece, which will then butt up into this corner, and then I'll have another scribe on this smaller piece, and that'll butt up against the architrave on the door. So yeah, I'm going to work round left to right essentially. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's have a quick look at the tools that I'm going to be using today. I've got my chop saw, which will just be used for cutting to length, and when I come to do the joins, I'll need to cut a mitre or 45 degree angle on one of the ends, but I'll cover the joining of skirting boards later. I've got my drill, I'm using that to drill some holes in the wall, fix the skirting board in. I've got a couple of saws here. I've got my Japanese pull saw, which I just use to do some straight cuts when I do the corner joins, and the coping saw, which again, when I come around to the scribing, I will talk about that. And I've got some screws and some wall plugs, which I'll be using to fix to the wall. So I'll be using mechanical fixings all the way around, so that is screws and wall plugs. If you wanted to, you could, or if your wall was flat, you could probably get away with just using some grip fill or some grab adhesive or something like that. But I think I prefer to use mechanical fixings on my skirting boards. And I've also got a bit of sandpaper there just to tidy up some of the edges. So yeah, that's the tools. So as I mentioned, the first length is just a straight cut. So I cut that off camera, I forgot to film that first bit, but essentially just use the chop saw to cut that to length, and that is just resting in there at the moment. You can see at the top of the skirting boards I've got a bit of a gap. It's nothing too great. I think once I've pulled that in with some screws, that'll be within caulking distance. So I'm going to go ahead and get some screws in here. So I'm going to drill through, put some raw plugs in, and then put some screws through. So hopefully that first one will go on relatively easily. So to fix the skirting board to the wall, I am marking off where I'm going to drill. Not completely necessary, but makes it look neat if you get all your holes in a line. And then I'm drilling through the skirting board using a 6mm masonry drill bit. You could argue that you could go through with the wood drill bit first and then the masonry drill bit, but I find that the masonry drill bit for the will work just fine just going through both. So I'm going through the board straight into the wall. Then I'm adding a rule plug to the hole, giving that a tap in before putting a screw in, giving that a little tap until the rule plug sort of meets some resistance, so you know that it's gone through the board and into the wall, and then just tightening it up with my battery drill, and I'm just repeating that in all of the locations. Okay, so that's the first one. First run on. I've had to put an extra screw in there, just to bring it a little bit closer to the wall, because it was pinging out of that. I think I've got a dip in the wall there, so just to bring that within caulking distance. And I think I can probably fill that gap with decorator's caulk. So now it's on to the other run now, and I'll be scribing the join at this end. You can see that when I've offered up one piece to, or butted up one piece to the other piece, there is a small gap at the bottom. That is because probably my skirting board on the right there is leaning out or just sort of slightly in at the bottom. I could try and make that square, but actually what I'm going to do is cut the end of my skirting board that I'm going to fit in there to match that profile. So I'm going to angle my chop saw out, take a little nibble off, and that'll hopefully sit square. That square, I can use my chop saw with that same angle that I just cut to start my scribing. So there are a couple of ways you can do the scribe. One is just to trace on your board like so. You can just draw around it and then cut that out. What I'm going to do, make it slightly easier for myself, is angle my chop saw over to 45 degrees and take a mitre. So let's do that quickly. So what you can see now is I've got this mitre on the end, and what I'm going to do is just cut along this edge here and around there, and that'll give me the profile against which to put that board up against the other board. So not the best camera angle here for you to see what I'm doing, but I am using my Japanese pull saw just to cut the straight part of this. So following that profile round, and what I'm doing on this is slightly angling my saw so that the cut goes behind the front edge, so it's angled back from the front edge. That'll give me a nice crisp sort of line when I'm fitting that against the other piece of skirting board. And when it comes to cutting the profile, I just got my coping saw out and followed that curve all the way around to the corner. I managed to get a bit of breakout when I was cutting this on the MDF. It gets quite thin in that corner in the sort of point there, which means that I got a little bit of breakout where it just sort of blew the MDF apart. But this was only a test piece, but if that does happen when you're doing your skirting board, there's nothing that can't be hidden with a little bit of filler or a little bit of caulk. With the profile cut, I can just offer it up against the wall, make a few adjustments with a bit of sandpaper, but overall, pretty pleased with the way that turned out. Now I just got to repeat that for the other corners. So I mentioned earlier there was a bit of a gap behind where one of the pieces of skirting board needed to go. That's not ideal because there's nothing for the screws to grab into. So what I'm doing here is just putting some wooden sort of fillers or packers in there, and I've just got a bit of 2x1 which I am screwing to the floorboards, and then I'm going to use a few window shims just to pack out the rest of it so that my skirting board sits flush. And with one corner completed, I can just complete that same job on all the other corners. So scribing on one end and cutting it off at the other. With the one on the left hand side here, I did have a bit of a dip in the floor, so I'm just kneeling on this bit of skirting board, just applying as much pressure as I can to try and close that gap down. Luckily this side was much easier to drill and screw because I'm just going into the studs. The only thing left to do then was to fill in all of the countersinks with some wood filler, let that dry and give it a sand back, and then give everything a caulk. I'm just putting a bead on and then using the Kramer Fuji kit, I think it's called, which is a great kit for caulking and siliconing. Really like it. If you want to know more about that, Charlie DIY, also on YouTube, does a really great video on caulking, so go and check him out. So now I just need to leave that for 24 hours while that dries, and then I can paint skirting boards. But that is essentially this room skirting boarded and complete. These bits here are just some holes I needed to fill in my plastering, but skirting boards are on, just a little bit of painting and touching up, and I'm done. So we have it, skirting board is on, I am complete for the day, so last thing for me to do is enjoy a beer. And today I've got a Tiny Rebel Pineapple Express IPA, so have a taste of that. I can't taste the pineapple. But anyway, you guys stay safe and get some stuff done.